Oskar, Fundacja Napraw sobie miasto. Dzisiaj rozmawiamy z Leslie Kern, autorką książki Miasto dla kobiet. Hi, how are you?
I'm great, thank you for having me.
Yeah. You wrote a book called, unfortunately in Polish, Miasto dla kobiet, so it means city for women. Originally it was called Feminist City.
Yes.
I'm an architect, and actually the title was for me like a little bit deceiving, because for me, City for Women sounds like a book about how to design better cities for women. You know, some kind of school book or something. And Feminist City, I found it more like a manifesto.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, for me, the closest thing to is Lindzie Nochlin.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is why there is no famous women artists. Yeah.
Yes.
And this is this kind of approach. Don't you think?
Yes, I am not an architect or a planner, so my intention in writing the book was not to provide a blueprint or a plan or a textbook, as you correctly interpreted when you read it. My intention was to try to open up for everyday people, not just those who are professionals in city building, a different way of looking at the city that around them, we kind of take for granted the built environment. Often it's been here for a very long time, sometimes hundreds and hundreds of years, and we might not stop to question who designed it, who is it for, who does it work for now, who doesn't it work for, and so I hope that people can take that way of seeing away from the book.
Yeah. Perhaps my point of view for your work is skewed a little bit, because actually I'm an architect, and my first connection with this type of approach was at the university in Gliwice. There is a group of lecturers working about planning for people over 65 years old.
Yes.
Yeah, and I worked with cyclists, which is a similar approach, how to design stuff specifically for specific groups of people, and then this crashed against typical things that happen on the streets. That actually you ride a bike and actually you can't cross the street because you have curbs. We are too high and it is impossible to change it. The same approach is you're 65 or you have small kids and you with a buggy, and then you can't cross the street. And actually, this is my approach. And actually, your book was not surprise for me. Maybe it was the most surprising thing was it's actually someone wrote it so late, because Lindzie Nochlin is 73, yeah, and then in urban planning it appeared 2017.
The book?
Yeah.
Yes, 2019 in
19,
Canada.
even
yes.
later. Yeah. And actually, why it took so long just to realize that actually women are omitted in this all urban space?
I should say that, the ideas that I presented in the book, I'm reproducing ideas that women, urbanists, architects, planners, just everyday women in the city have been talking about for decades, if not more than 100 years. So I am not the first to say it, and I'm not the first book, maybe the first one translated into Polish. I'm drawing on this long legacy, and the question of, why now, and why does it take so long to get these ideas circulating in the public? Partly, I think it does have to do with the fact that the built environment is very durable. It is hard to change. It requires sometimes physical transformations and requires a lot of political will. a lot of strategizing from various groups, and sometimes it might seem like an overwhelming challenge, but one of the messages I want to get out in the book is that you can start with small changes, and you can also think about how those changes will benefit other groups. As you said, there's a lot of similarities between what cyclists are asking for, what elderly people would want in cities, and if we can come together and see what changes would benefit all of these different groups, then we'll actually start to make some progress.
Yeah. Another thing that struck me reading your book, actually, that 20th century was a time like a very positive approach for a change. People like Le Corbusier wanted to create better cities. That actually all the 19th century cities actually was very dark and gloomy and no fun to live in. Although actually we start admire 19th century architecture, but actually the quality of life here was not it was not super good. Mm-hmm. And then actually I realized something that it struck me, that actually Le Corbusier created Le Modular, his famous idea of creating spaces like a universal system of designing spaces, and actually it was based on an imaginary protagonist of dark novel, because he liked this kind of book. And then in parallel, actually at the same time, Margarete Schütte-Lisicki designed Frankfurter Kitchen, which is a first approach of ergonomic design of kitchen, and actually it was a super scientific approach analyzing movement of people inside the kitchen, and this denied the common approach that these men are super logic and women are emotional and something. This is totally contrary, because this logical man created something superior, some kind of super idea, and actually it was super emotional, because he took the main dimension out of nothing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you've put that so well, and I think one of the problems is that we sometimes assume that these grand conceptual ideas that come from men that we might eventually, call geniuses or, fathers of this, that, or the other thing, is that they are great in concept, but often they ignore everyday life and how people actually use and interact with spaces. And so the approach around the Frankfurt Kitchen and other kinds of designs like that, it's about looking at things that often male architects and designers are not that interested in, like how do people do the very boring daily tasks of preparing a meal for somebody or putting children to bed or moving through their apartment. Those things, because they've been seen as the domain of women, have often not interested these great thinkers and conceptual planners, and I think, as you said, it really does challenge this divide that assumes that there's a scientific rationale behind what men do and not behind what women do, but it's really just a matter of where we've decided to put our attention and our gaze.
Yeah, but actually designing, we call it for women, but actually there's a universal design. There's actually a system called universal design that actually imposes designing and thinking about everyone. But actually the reality is officially in Poland it is obligatory for official building of government building and to design along this. But actually regulations that says only you must do it along this and nothing more. And of course usually architects is nothing very strict regulations, 30 centimeters of here, 1 meter over here, and so on. Then they will skip it immediately because it's simpler.
Yes. Government standards for things like accessibility impose this kind of minimum standard, right? What is the very least that an architect, engineer, designer has to do in order to meet these requirements? And there's not really any incentive for people to go beyond that and to do more to create what, as you're saying, this truly universal design that would benefit all sorts of people. And so if we kind of keep just aiming for the minimum, we're not going to see major transformations happening.
Yeah, but actually some things are super simple. I personally was engaged in redesigning curbs for bicycles, but actually low curb actually is benefiting everyone, because even abled person, it's better to walk on the flat surface than over the curb. And actually there's very hard talks with the managers, street management, just to change it for the newly, actually at the time, constructed street. And then after a very long talk, it turned out that actually lying it flat costs them nothing, and it is possible to just to change it. And a simple talk, would you make it like a flat? For them it was impossible. After 1 hour of talks and quarreling, and that it turned out it is possible. But actually, today we talked with other people who came here to Lab Corner about engaging, especially women, with this kind of conversation.
Yeah, and I think, as you point out, a lot of the things that people are calling for are quite simple. They are not about bulldozing cities and starting fresh. They're about making kind of small incremental changes to the built environment, the social environment, to our policies that would start to make things better. As you say, there can be so much resistance. I think sometimes there's just this built-in resistance in bureaucracies to doing anything differently than how it's been done before. And so sometimes you have to bang your head against that brick wall for a while to see those changes happen.
Some example of new generations. I had a class with high school. Here in Katowice there is a high school with a special class specializing in architecture. And young people are preparing to go before the university, trying to design something. And we had a special, maybe more about ecology, climate change workshop for them. I had a small lecture about gender in the city, and there was a group of girls that actually, and I asked them if they imagine there is gender in the city. It was kind of a provocative, but actually I thought teenagers in 21st century will actually know that there is this kind of problem. And no, actually they had no idea that actually they thought about city just roads, houses and something. They said, no, there is no gender over here. And then I had to explain them that actually no, because parking just in the middle of the road is a problem for women with buggies to cross the street and so on. Lots of small details that actually are bad for mostly women and not fully abled people, that actually are the problem.
I think this goes to our earlier point about the built environment kind of seeming kind of paradoxically almost natural, it's kind of always been here, and we don't see it as having kind of an ideology behind it, or as expressing a belief system, or expressing a point of view about how a society organizes itself and who it sees as important or not important. In my own experience, maybe it doesn't surprise me that those young women would not see that. For me, when I had a baby and was trying to navigate the city as a new mother, those were the first moments when I was like, yes, there is actually a systemic problem going on here. It was hard for me to see it earlier when I was more, I guess, unencumbered, if you will, and didn't have a sense of being excluded by the physical environment itself. So maybe if some of those young women have children, it will become very obvious to them as well.
Yeah, actually, I knew some more than them, because there is like a changed definition of disabled person in Poland, because like usually when we say like disabled, it's like we see the person on the wheelchair. Yeah, but actually every one of us is sometimes disabled. Yes. Like you break a leg, you're disabled. Sometimes very minor injuries can happen, and actually then it makes it difficult to navigate to the streets, to the buildings, and so on. I have another a finishing question for you, because actually in your book you are describing like traditionally women trapped in the houses, which is like a very Christian thing. Good women stay at home, and women outside are bad girls and sex workers and something. And actually there is this the notion of flâneuse, beautifully coined by I don't know who, but I think it was because flaneur is Charles Baudelaire, and then Walter Benjamin, and actually, is it sad that actually the problem of flaneuse was changed by capitalism into a person strolling to the shopping malls?
Yes, I think it is unfortunate that often the what's seen as the appropriate role for women in public environments is to be a consumer, right? To be going shopping, to be going to a cafe or a restaurant, rather than taking that the idea of the flaneur as someone who is just part of the crowd, observing urban life, participating in it if they wish to, but instead we've sort of said, well, yes, women can be in the public sphere, but they should be shopping for their family, or we're going to create these shopping malls and consumption spaces for them. And I think that is quite limiting for women, and of course is also really just about capitalism rather than any kind of gender liberation. So I would say in a feminist city vision, we're thinking about a much broader range of roles and activities and freedoms for women, rather than just the freedom to shop.
Yeah, okay. It was nice to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.